Swing and a miss. That's today's reaction from both Republicans and Democrats to Elizabeth Warren's big DNA gamble. The one that proved she could be as little as 1/10 of 1% Native American. That's not very much. And the one that could sink her presidential run before it even begins. So sad. As you know, the Massachusetts senator yesterday revealed the big results of her test after years of taunts from President Trump. He's famously called her Pocahontas at rallies from coast to coast, and according to Democratic strategists, it appears that Warren thought the DNA test would not only end the controversy, it would silence the president. Instead, pretty much the exact opposite has happened last night. The liberal media jumped all over it. Watch.
It's not 1/10, it's not 1/100th. 1/1000th and 24s does not allow you to say you're a Cherokee.
It seemed to be that this was a way of getting the Pocahontas thing out of the way. Put the test out there. Now she can move forward. Yeah. And I don't think it does that for her. I don't think that the standard of what was found in there is going to be satisfying to people.
Best I can gather, according to your paper's reporting, she's 1/1000th or something like. I mean, I think I might be just as Native American as she is.
Maybe even more so, which makes you extra hot and eligible to run the world. Well, then the Cherokee Nation spoke out against Senator Warren.
Elizabeth Warren has relied on stereotypes and popular misconceptions about Native Americans to prop up her false claims. I think that her decision shows that she does not listen to Native people and is more concerned about her own political career and her ambitions than tribal sovereignty and Native rights.
And of course, this morning, the one person the test was aimed at came out swinging even harder than before. President Trump tweeting, quote, "Pocahontas, the bad version, sometimes referred to as Elizabeth Warren, is getting slammed. She took a bogus DNA test, and it showed that she may be 1/1024, far less than the average American. Now, Cherokee Nation denies her DNA test is useless. Even they don't want her. Phony." Now that her claims of being of Indian heritage have turned out to be a scam and a lie, Elizabeth Warren should apologize for perpetrating this fraud against the American public. Harvard called her, quote, "a person of color," amazing con, and would not have taken her otherwise. Ooh, so how damaging was Elizabeth Warren's big DNA extravaganza? Joining me now, editor at townhall.com and Fox News contributor, it's Katie Pavlich.
Hello.
Katie, welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening
to
you.
Here. Yes.
So let's talk about this a little bit, because we've had sort of an ongoing discussion about cultural appropriation.
Right.
And what is inspiration? What is appropriation? Essentially, what is cultural theft? Now, and we don't know all of the details because Harvard hasn't released them, but if Senator Warren was, in fact, given a prestigious spot at Harvard Law School, wouldn't that be denying someone else for whom that spot was granted in the first place?
Yeah, I'd say this counts as cultural appropriation and certainly theft. And there's plenty of evidence against Elizabeth Warren to show that she used this false perception, this false claim of Native heritage to get ahead in her career. Now, when she rolled out this fancy video with the website and all this stuff and the test, you know, she said there's no evidence to show that I was hired based on having this status. But if you look at the way that she used it when she applied for certain positions. Mm-hmm. She didn't put it in when it wasn't applicable in others. In her tweets now that she's tripling down instead of kind of coming out and saying that she made a mistake, she's still saying that she didn't list herself as Native in the Senate directory, but at the same time, you know, Fordham Law was listing her as the first woman of color at Harvard Law. Mm-hmm. They're getting that information from somewhere. Elizabeth Warren keeps denying it, and as your montage showed, this is coming at her from the left and the right. She did this to go after one person, Donald Trump. She doesn't have interest in kind of reconciling her relationship with any kind of, quote, heritage that she has, because there is none. And if you look at what she's saying now, she continues to attack the president. She's not addressing the comments from the Cherokee Nation saying that she's being unhelpful in their cause. She's not addressing the issues of people complaining about it.
And that's really important, because they say essentially it boils down to eugenics, and they find this practice to be disgusting, right. That people are now ascribing themselves tribal membership based on science, and that is not, in fact, how they welcome people into their community.
And Elizabeth Warren has been very calculated in this argument. It's almost like she knew that was going to be the response, because in the video she released, she's flipping through this album of photos saying, "I'm not a member of a tribe, however, I do have DNA." And if you look at what she's saying again on her Twitter feed, which the president is, she's trying to goad the president into responding to her, she's saying the same thing. I respect tribal sovereignty, but I just want to get it out there that I am correct against the president's accusations that I'm not Native American. The final thing I want to say is this doesn't just come from Donald Trump. Sure, he says Pocahontas, and he's pointed it out on a national level and put a magnifying glass on it, but the Boston Globe locally in her home state of Massachusetts, as she goes into this election in a couple of weeks, came out with multiple stories saying that she needed to clear up the situation here because there were major discrepancies in how she said that she did use the status, didn't use the status, and there's lots of evidence to show that she not only lied about it, but she did use it to get ahead.
Which means that someone else wasn't afforded that important stepladder. But it's really funny because you always look at this and you go, well, where do we go from here? I love political stunts. In this day and age, we become addicted to them. They're fun to talk about and analyze. The world is politically upside down, and there is an upside to that. But I think what she's done, if I were a Democrat, I would be really upset because if we're talking about this and we're not talking about strategy and ideas going into the midterms, I'm going to be a little peeved.
And it goes against everything that Democrats claim to stand up for. Real diversity in universities, academic institutions, and business. When you have a white woman claiming for decades that she was part Native American, not to mention part Cherokee, and having it be completely false. And yet now we have the situation where she's denied someone else the position and really gotten rid of that diversity as a result of her actions.
Yeah, she's Rachel Dolezal. Thank you so much, Katie Pavlich. And she is Katie Pavlich.
I am, not Cherokee.
Well done. All right. Moments ago, Trish Regan asked President Trump about the disappearance and presumed murder of Washington Post columnist and U.S. resident Jamal Khashoggi. Watch.
Turkey and Saudi Arabia are looking at it very strongly, and it depends whether or not the king or the crown prince knew about it, in my opinion. Number one, what happened, but whether or not they knew about it. If they knew about it, that would be bad. If they didn't know about it, bad things can happen. You look at what they're doing in Iran. Don't forget, Saudi Arabia is our partner. They're our ally against Iran and against missiles and against what they're doing, trying to take over the Middle East. And by the way, since I'm here, not succeeding. They're heading down the tubes if you look at what's going on.
Well, the New York Times is out with a new report tonight claiming one of the suspects identified in Khashoggi's disappearance is a frequent companion of Saudi Arabia's crown prince. And 3 others are also linked to the crown prince's security detail. The Times reports that if the Turkish officials are right, and that's a big if, then the presence of these men, it says, might provide a direct link between what happened and Prince Mohammed. But here's what Trump told Trish about why he doesn't want to push too hard on the Saudis.
We're not really hurting them, we're hurting ourselves. So we want to be smart. I don't want to give up a $110 billion order or whatever it is. It's the largest order ever given by an outside country, okay? And I don't want to give that up. You're talking about jobs.
So how will this ordeal impact relations between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia? Joining me now, Fox News politics editor Chris Stirewalt is here. Welcome, Chris.
Ma'am.
Oh, yes, sir. So the problem I have here is I don't necessarily trust the Turkish government. I certainly don't trust the Saudis. And, you know, of course, we don't have all the evidence, and we have to wait for these things before we render final judgment. But something sure is rotten in the state of Denmark and Saudi Arabia and Turkey.
And we have a problem that we have useful allies in both. We have necessary allies in a lot of ways in both. Turkey has been heading in a dangerous direction under Erdogan, much more authoritarian and more flirtation with Islamism, but still a NATO member, still home to Incirlik Air Base and an important bulwark against Russia and Iran. So we rely on Turkey a great deal, but we also rely on the Saudis as a counterbalancing force to the Iranians, as the president mentioned, but also increasingly in an effort to try to deal with the Israeli-Palestinian situation.
That's a line we've been given, but Chris, I don't necessarily buy it.
Okay. Well, which part? Don't you? All of it?
I don't buy that those are necessary and moderate allies. I think if there's one thing I like about the president, it's his ability to rethink the way things have always been just because they've always been that way. He's not necessarily doing that here because he's letting economics be his guide. And I think other times we have to have a greater moral obligation here. And I have to say, I agree with Lindsey Graham on this, who's being much tougher on Saudi Arabia, at least rhetorically, than the president.
Well, so Saudi Arabia basically functions as an American client state. And we're not supposed to talk about that, or the United States government's not supposed to talk about that because it would be a bad look for the House of Saud, right? This is not what they want to talk about. They want to look free and strong and independent.
What about those 17 hijackers on 9/11? Was that a good look?
And what about the U.S. fleet anchored off of Bahrain? And what about the U.S. troops that aren't allowed to show their insignia when they're walking around inside the kingdom? Mm-hmm. They rely on us for their security, they rely on us for their arms, and they also rely on us as a market for their oil. So basically the message, if I can sort of figure it out, that's coming from both Lindsey Graham and hardliners in the Senate, but also from the administration, is you got to give us something here. This is what the United States is basically saying. Lindsey Graham has said it needs to be the Crown Prince. This is a bad guy. You need to take this guy out and restore the original line of succession. But you got to give us something here. You got to give us some cover because what you've done is heinous, and you've got to give. It's sort of like when a parent is talking to a child and is trying to talk them out of the trouble that they've got themselves into. Are you sure it wasn't an accident?
Yeah.
Are you sure you didn't put it over here? Are you sure that when you bought the
it sounds like helicopter parenting.
Yep.
And that's why we're culturally in the mess we're in, because parents don't learn to tell their children no, which is so incredibly necessary. And I don't believe in this sort of economic appeasement with Saudi Arabia from before 9/11, but certainly it peaked on 9/11 and beyond, and they have not given good explanations. And if it means that we have to embrace new technology as only this country can and get off their dirty, filthy oil, I'm fine with that.
This administration loves the Saudis. This is
they all do.
But
the Bushes love the Saudis. Obama loved the Saudis.
Well,
Hillary Clinton took their filthy money after they were killing women and subjecting them to immoral Sharia law to the tune of tens of millions of dollars without blinking one of her lovely eyelashes.
Obama eventually came to terms that it was an unavoidable part of doing business, but he was trying to rebalance the Middle East to empower the Iranians to be a counterweight against the Gulf Arab states, the Sunni states. So he was trying to...
He got us into so many of the messes we are in and exacerbated so much of what's going on in the Middle East, including with Iran, Saudi Arabia, and certainly in Afghanistan.
Well, I didn't do it.
I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you at all. I love the way you see the world. I know you seek the truth, and I know there are a lot of difficult elements to tease out here, because there are a lot of people who believe we have a vested interest over there. I am not one of them because I love freedom.
Trump wants cover. He wants the Saudis to give him cover. He wants to be able to say, okay, look, we told him that they're not allowed to murder dissidents in foreign countries, and they've said that they were sorry, and they've done this so that this can go away, because you heard Trump. He likes the deal on arms. He likes the way that they flatter him. He likes the business that they do. He likes all of that stuff.
I know.
You remember the orb? He wants to go back to the good days with the orb.
If only the orb could tell us what really happened in Turkey, we could avoid so much of this.
What is in the orb?
Well, I appreciate you as well. Thank you, my friend.
You bet.
Very good. Well, President Trump also told Trish Regan he wants Stormy Daniels and Michael Avenatti to pay up after a federal judge dismissed her defamation lawsuit and ordered them to pay his legal fees. Watch.
You're going to have her pay the
In fact, he has to
legal
pay
fees?
me legal fees.
She does?
I don't think he has any money, but he and she have to pay me a lot of legal fees, and it's based
You're going to
on
hold them
Texas,
accountable for that?
based on Texas law. I love Texas. Based on Texas law, where the legal fees are nice and plentiful.
And you'll hold them to that?
Are you serious? Of course.
I'm just asking.
Wouldn't you be disappointed if I said no? They'll pay a lot.
Fine. The judge's decision to throw out the case sparked a Twitter war this morning, which the president referred to Daniels as, quote, horse face.
Look
And
how
called
many
Avenatti,
picking
quote,
microphones
a third-rate
doing.
lawyer.
Oh my
Which was
God.
kind of it.
That's how many
that is
things
the nicest
she's
thing
had in her
anyone's
mouth.
ever said about Michael Avenatti, by the way. Stormy fired back with some cracks about the president's anatomy, but the joke's on her because she's going to have to pay up. So will fighting with the pole dancer help the president's poll numbers?
Yeah.
Joining me now, great American PAC senior strategist and former Trump campaign manager,
They should run
Corey
together.
Lewandowski. Welcome back, Corey.
Good evening.
How much of a win is this for the president?
Well, this is clearly vindication. You know, the president said all along that this was a frivolous lawsuit, and the ruling today not only shows that this was a frivolous lawsuit, but more importantly, it vindicated him, and he is now receiving compensation for the attorney fees that he paid through Avenatti and through Stormy Daniels. So this is a great vindication for the president. I know the media doesn't want to talk about it, but it shows that the third-rate attorney brought a case which was unsustainable, and the judge threw it out today and said it was basically a case that had no merit to it whatsoever, so pay the attorney fees for the president. It's a big win today.
And the judge also said that what the president has said on Twitter was rhetorical hyperbole. That is great news, not only for the president, which could be very helpful to him in several of his legal cases. It's also a win for the First Amendment, because according to this judge, that very rhetorical hyperbole is protected under that glorious amendment, which is the first one.
Well, and it should be. Look, the only people that are monitoring Twitter and stopping, conservatives from talking on Twitter is Twitter itself. So every time they don't like something that is tweeted, they find a way to block it for their content. But what it comes down to is this judge said exactly what we already knew, which is you have a right to express yourself. It's the freedom of the First Amendment that you've used. This president does not use an official government Twitter account that he took over or started when he became the president of the United States. This is the same Twitter account he had as a private citizen, as a candidate for office, as the president-elect, and now as the president. It's his own Twitter account. It's his own ideas. Mm-hmm. He's not making policy on this Twitter account. And so he has a right to free speech like every other American does, and that's what the judge saw today.
So I don't think that the back and forth with Stormy Daniels is going to help him, but does he have to call her horseface?
Well, look, I've said many times the president's the greatest counterpuncher we've ever seen. Right. He finds nicknames for other people that. Well, look, she's attacked him so many times, and what he did is he responded in kind, and he's a great counterpuncher, and now people always think of her as horseface because he has this magic ability that when he gives someone a nickname, it's just so fitting that it sticks with them for the rest of their lives. So now she'll be Stormy Horseface Daniels forever.
I don't know, man. I'm so over equine and fungi. I can't see straight. Corey Lewandowski, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For making this 9 o'clock hum. Very good. Coming up, Wall Street took a major dive last week, but today it shot right back up like your blood pressure with all the volatility. So what's going to happen? Are you worried? You shouldn't be, because marijuana is going to be legal in Canada, and you can move there and start smoking tomorrow. But you don't have to live in the Great White North to invest in the green stuff and enjoy the green rush. Scotty Martin is here to tell you how to make money off of Canada's big green leaf next. Rocketed today. Money, 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 money. With the Dow logging the biggest one-day gain since March. A stark contrast from last week's dramatic dips. Moments ago, the president told our own Trish Regan that he thinks the markets will continue to sour. So what is fueling the market? And is it here to stay? I hope so. Fox Business Network's Christina Partsinevelos. She is here to explain it all. Christina, what's happening?
Money, money, money.
Right,
I saw that. You just did that. I had to. I'm sorry. But yes, we had the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ all closing much higher today, above 2%. A lot of that does have to do with investors getting in. Last week was quite rough. We saw a lot of red on the screen. This time you have earnings that came out much stronger than anticipated. You had JP Morgan. They made a lot of money off of investment banking. You had Goldman Sachs putting out their earnings. You even had Netflix. After the bell today when it closed, Netflix put out their earnings. The expectation was so high and so good with that company that you saw the stock climb about 14% higher. So you've got the positives right now, earnings season. You have a lot of analysts expecting earnings to average at least 19% higher for this quarter. But there are some concerns. The looming concerns are trade tensions and the tariffs costing companies money, and the fact that the Federal Reserve could be raising or will be raising interest rates, which makes debt more expensive for you and I and corporations. So that's the market part. The economy part, though, still shows so much strength. We have some more numbers today coming out from the Labor Department showing that the economy added 7.1 million new jobs in the summer. That's a record since they've been polling this. And we had the president, who I know that you just mentioned it before, was on Trish Regan, the show right before us. He mentioned and weighed in on the economy. Listen in.
I mean, whether you look at median income, whether you look at employment or unemployment, no matter what chart you're looking at, it's either ever or 50 or 60 years the best numbers. It's probably the best economy we've ever had.
Strong numbers. The problem is you need people to fill those jobs, and that's when you could see a tighter labor market cause inflation to climb higher. Why? Because companies need to retain their employees. So what do? perks, maybe offer them a better raise.
Yeah.
That could be something that will possibly weaken the economy going forward.
Subsidize the cafeteria like they do in this building. I love it.
I love it too. And the gym. Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
The gym is fan. All they need is a sauna in there, and we would be home free. Christina, here's a libertarian solution to two of the problems you brought up. One, end the Fed, and two, free trade, baby. That's all we need.
We don't live in a utopian world, though.
That's not utopia. That is reality. And thank you for bringing it to us tonight. Great energy.
Thanks.
Well, in just a few hours, the place where Christina once called home, Canada, will become just the second country on earth after Uruguay to legalize recreational marijuana nationally. It is obviously a much bigger deal than Uruguay. Well, you know, Uruguay. Starting tomorrow, Canadians can buy pot in government-run stores and websites and have it delivered to their homes. Isn't technology great? But it could eventually be sold in bars and restaurants as well. So how can Americans cash in on an industry that promises to be worth billions of dollars? Joining me now, Chief Investment Officer of Kingsview Asset Management, Fox News contributor Scott Martin is here.
So if we start walking right now, because I don't think anybody would give us a ride, we could probably be there by morning to have a little toke. Is that what we're talking about?
I don't know, man. I can't do it. Sadly, I am allergic to
I've heard that.
T to the H to the C.
So maybe I'll take over. It's pretty amazing. I mean, here's the thing. Tomorrow is interesting because I think there's actually going to be a northwest wind mostly the afternoon. So be careful, especially if you're upstate New York, because it may be a really takeover here. It's amazing, though, to see where this has gone, Kendi, with respect to how North America is now like the epicenter.
How much of an upside is there, and how do people capitalize on it?
Okay.
Are there funds that you can buy into if you don't know how to pick cannabis stocks?
That's right. Picking cannabis stocks is probably harder than picking the buds off the plants. I've heard, because of the fact that a lot of these guys are small. Yes, right. My friend down in South America, because the word is that a lot of the stocks that are out there that are publicly traded for investors are very small. They don't have a lot of revenues, and they're trading very expensively. So there are some things out there, like there's a company like IIPR, for example, that invests in growing facilities in the United States, for example. So that's another way to get some exposure. MJ is an ETF. Write these down. Yep, IIPR is a real estate investment.
MJEFT?
MJ ETF. Yes,
ETF?
MJ actually has a bunch of the. I'm going to forget all these when I tell you them, but MJ ETF has a lot of the private companies, or public companies rather, that are in Canada that are making inroads into the cannabis industry. Don't forget, too, I know it sounds crazy, don't forget about the Pepsis, the Cokes.
Okay, that's my other question, because, you know, we hear about these big companies that want to cash in, they're already vertically integrated, and they can easily switch over to cannabis ingredients. So Molson, Coca-Cola,
Budweiser,
Pepsi.
Absolutely. Not hard for them to buy up some of these small companies, Kenny, that already have the legal rights to be producing, say, weed in Canada, and then sooner or later in the States. Another interesting one, too, that I was thinking about Starbucks. One of the other things that people are talking about is the infusion of cannabis into coffee. Which sounds like a really fun idea, by the way.
Stoner speedball.
I'll try it out. Yeah,
we're gonna need to build a wall on our northern border because these zombies are going to be coming over.
So that's perfect.
We want your women, eh?
Society is ready for that, though, and so especially with Halloween coming up, and so it's also just thinking about traditional kind of companies that are probably going to take advantage of this craze.
It's crazy, but you're doing the research, and people will be making the money.
$30 billion potential arena of investment as far as how these companies are going to grow by, say, 2025.
I will take just $1 billion of that and be fine.
That's
absolutely fine. Thank you so much,
Scott
Martin. Woo! Elizabeth Warren's DNA test debacle has set the political world on fire. We want our next guest to look at things from a different angle. Jessica Tarlov, Guy Benson, and Dolph Ziggler join me in moments for what is going to be an unforgettable party swap. Oh, Liz, that's next.